Hello, and welcome back to Baby Alice's stories. We now return to Jingo by Terry Pratchett. Part 1. It was a moonless night, which was good for the purpose of Solid Jackson. He fished for curious squid, so called because, as well as being squid, they were curious. That is to say, their curiosity was the curious thing about them. Shortly after they got curious about the lantern that Solid had hung over the stern of his boat, they started to become curious about the way in which various of their number suddenly vanished skywards with a splash. Some of them even became curious, very briefly curious, about the sharp, barbed thing that was coming very quickly towards them. The curious squid were extremely curious. Unfortunately, they weren't very good at making connections. It was a very long way to this fishing ground, but for Solid, the trip was usually well worth it. The curious squid were very small, harmless, difficult to find, and reckoned by connoisseurs to have the foulest taste of any creature in the world. This made them very much in demand in a certain kind of restaurant where highly skilled chefs made, with great care, dishes containing no trace of the squid whatsoever. Solid Jackson's problem was that tonight, a moonless night in the spawning season, when the squid were especially curious about everything, the chef seemed to have been at work on the sea itself. There was not a single interested eyeball to be seen. There weren't any other fish either, and usually there were a few attracted to the light. He'd caught sight of one. It had been making through the water extremely fast in a straight line. He laid down his trident and walked to the other end of the boat, where his son Les was also gazing intently at the torch-lit sea. "Not a thing in half an hour," said Solid. "You sure we're in the right spot, Dad?" Solid squinted at the horizon. There was a faint glow in the sky that indicated the city of Al-Khali on the Klatchian coast. He turned round. The other horizon glowed too, with the lights of Ankh-Morpork. The boat bobbed gently, halfway between the two. "Course we are," he said. But certainty edged away from his words, because there was a hush on the sea. It didn't look right. The boat rocked a little, but that was with their movement, not from any motion of the waves. It felt as if there was going to be a storm. But the stars twinkled softly, and there was not a cloud in the sky. The stars twinkled on the surface of the water too. Now that was something you didn't often see. "I reckon we ought to be getting out of here," Solid said. Les pointed at the slack sail. "What are we going to use for wind, Dad?" It was then that they heard the splash of oars. Solid, squinting hard, could just make out the shape of another boat heading towards him. He grabbed his boat hook. I know that's you, you thieving foreign bastard! The oars stopped. A voice sang over the water. May you be consumed by 1,000 devils, you damn person! The other boat glided closer. It looked foreign, with eyes painted on the prow. Fished them all out, have you? I'll take my trident to you, you bottom-feeding scum that you are! My curvy sword at your neck, you unclean son of a dog of the female persuasion! Les looked over the side. Little bubbles fizzed on the surface of the sea. Dad, he said. That's greasy Arif out there, snapped his father. You take a good look at him. He's been coming out here for years, stealing our squid. The evil, lying little devil. Dad, you get on them oars and I'll knock his black teeth out. Les could hear a voice saying from the other boat, See, my son, how the underhanded fish thief. Row! His father shouted. To the oars! Shouted someone in the other boat. Whose squid are they, Dad? Said Les. Ours! What? Even before we've caught them? Just you shut up and row! I can't move the boat, Dad. We're stuck on something. It's 100 fathoms deep here, boy. What's there to stick on? Les tried to disentangle an oar from the thing rising slowly out of the fizzing sea. Looks like a chicken, Dad. There was a sound from below the surface. It sounded like some bell or gong slowly swinging. Chickens can't swim. It's made of iron, Dad. Solid scrambled to the rear of the boat. It was a chicken, made of iron. Seaweed and shells covered it, and water dripped off it as it rose against the stars. It stood on a cross-shaped perch. There seemed to be a letter on each of the 4 ends of the cross. Solid held the torch closer. What the? Then he pulled the oar free and sat down beside his son. Row like the blazes, Les! What's happening, Dad? Shut up and row! Get us away from it! Is it a monster, Dad? It's worse than a monster, son! Shouted Solid as the oars bit into the water. The thing was quite high now, standing on some kind of tower. What is it, Dad? What is it? It's a damned weathercock! There was not, on the whole, a lot of geological excitement. The sinking of continents is usually accompanied by volcanoes, earthquakes, and armadas of little boats containing old men anxious to build pyramids in mystic stone circles in some new land where being the possessor of genuine ancient occult wisdom might be expected to attract girls. But the rising of this one caused barely a ripple in the purely physical scheme of things. It more or less sidled back, like a cat who's been away for a few days and knows you've been worrying. Around the shores of the Circle Sea, a large wave, only 5 or 6 feet high by the time it reached them, caused some comment. And in some of the very low-lying swamp areas, the water swamped some villages of people that no one else cared about very much. But in a purely geological sense, nothing very much happened. In a purely geological sense. It's a city, Dad. Look, you can see all the windows and... I told you to shut up and keep rowing. The seawater surged down the streets on either side. Huge weed-encrusted buildings boiled slowly out of the surf. Father and son fought to keep some way on the boat as it was dragged along. And since lesson 1 in the art of rowing is that you do it while looking the wrong way, They didn't see the other boat.
You lunatic! Foolish man! Don't you touch that building! This country belongs to Ankh-Morpork!
The two boats spun in a temporary whirlpool.
I claim this land in the name of the Serif of Al-Khali. We saw it first. Les, you tell him we saw it first. We saw it first before you saw it first. Les, you saw him. He tried to hit me with that oar.
But Dad, you're waving that trident.
See the untrustworthy way he attacks us, Akhan.
There was a grinding noise from under the keel of both boats, and they began to tip as they settled into the sea bottom ooze.
Look, Father, there is an interesting statue. He has set his foot on Klatch soil, the squid thief. Get those filthy sandals off Ankh-Morporkian territory.
Oh, Dad! The two fishermen stopped screaming at each other, mainly in order to get their breath back. Crabs scuttled away. Water drained between the patches of weed, carving runnels in the grey silt.
Father, look! There's still colored tiles on the... Mine! Mine!
Les caught Akhan's eye. They exchanged a very brief glance, which was nevertheless modulated with a considerable amount of information. Beginning with the sheer galactic-sized embarrassment of having parents, and working up from there.
Dad, we don't have to, Les began. You shut up! It's your future I'm thinking about, my lad!
Yes, but who cares who saw it first, Dad? We're both hundreds of miles from home. I mean, who's going to know, Dad? The two squid fishermen glared at one another. The dripping buildings rose above them. There were holes that might well have been doorways, and glassless apertures that could have been windows. But all was darkness within. Now and again, Les fancied he could hear something slithering. Solid Jackson coughed.
The lad's right, he muttered. Daft to argue, just the four of us.
Indeed, said Arif. They backed away, each man carefully watching the other. Then, so closely that it was a chorus, they both yelled,
Grab the boat!
There was a confused couple of moments, and then each pair, boat carried over their heads, ran and slithered along the muddy streets. They had to stop and come back with mutual cries of, A kidnapper as well, eh? To get the right sons. As every student of exploration knows, the prize goes not to the explorer who first sets foot upon the virgin soil, but to the one who gets that foot home first, if it is still attached to his leg. This is a bonus. The weathercocks of Ankh-Morpork creaked around in the wind. Very few of them were in fact representations of Avis domestica. There were various dragons, fish, and miscellaneous animals. On the roof of the Assassins' Guild, a silhouette of one of the members squeaked into a new position, cloak and dagger at the ready. On the Beggars' Guild, a tin beggar's hand asked the wind for a quarter. On the Butchers' Guild, a copper pig sniffed the air. On the roof of the Thieves' Guild, a real, if rather deceased, unlicensed thief turned gently, which shows what you are capable of if you try, or at least if you try stealing without a license. The one on the library dome of Unseen University was running slow and wouldn't show the change for half an hour yet. But the smell of the sea drifted over the city. There was a tradition of soapbox public speaking in Sator Square. Speaking, quote-unquote, was stretching a point to cover the ranters, haranguers, and occasional self-absorbed mumblers that spaced themselves at intervals amongst the crowds. And traditionally, people said whatever was on their minds and at the top of their voices. The patrician, it was said, looked kindly on the custom. He did, and very closely too. He probably had someone make notes. So did the watch. It wasn't spying, Commander Vimes told himself. Spying was when you crept around peeking in windows. It wasn't spying when you had to stand back a bit so that you weren't deafened. He reached out without paying attention and struck a match on Sergeant Detritus.
That was me, sir,
said the troll reproachfully.
Sorry, Sergeant,
said Vimes, lighting a cigar.
It's not a problem.
They returned their attention to the speakers. It's the wind, thought Vimes. It's bringing something new. Usually the speakers dealt with all kinds of subjects, many of them on the cusp of sanity or somewhere in the peaceful valleys on the other side. But now they were all monomaniacs. Monomaniac, a noun, a person exhibiting unexaggerated or obsessive enthusiasm for or preoccupation with one thing. Monomaniac.
Time they were taught a lesson,
screamed the nearest one.
Why don't our so-called masters listen to the voice of the people? Ankh-Morpork has had enough of these swaggering brigands. They steal our fish. They steal our trade. And now they're stealing our land.
It would have been better if people had cheered, Vimes thought. People generally cheered the speakers indiscriminately to egg them on, but the crowd around this man just seemed to nod approval. He thought, they're actually thinking about what he said.
They stole my merchandise,
shouted a speaker opposite him.
It's a pirate bloody empire. I was boarded in Ankh-Morpork waters.
There was a general self-righteous muttering.
What did they steal, Mr. Jenkins?
Said a voice from the crowd.
A cargo of fine silks.
The crowd hissed.
Not dried fish, offal, and condemned meat then? That's your normal cargo, I believe.
Mr. Jenkins strained to look for the speaker.
Fine silks, he said. And what does the city care about that? Nothing.
There were shouts of
shame.
Has the city been told? Said the inquiring voice. People started to crane their heads, and then the crowd opened a little to reveal the figure of Commander Vimes of the City Watch.
Well, it's I,
Jenkins began.
I
care, said Vimes calmly. Shouldn't be too hard to track down a cargo of fine silks that stink of fish guts. There was laughter. Ankh-Morpork people always like some variety in their street theatre. Vimes apparently spoke to Sergeant Detritus, while keeping his gaze locked on Jenkins. Detritus, just you go along with Mr. Jenkins here, will you? His ship is the Milker, I believe. He'll show you all the lading bills and manifests and receipts and things, and then we can sort him out in jig time. There was a clang as Detritus's huge hand came to rest against his helmet.
Yes, sir.
You can't, said Jenkins quickly. They,
stole the paperwork as well.
Really? so they can take the stuff back to the shop if it doesn't fit?
Anyway, the ship sailed. Yes, sailed. Got to try and recoup my losses, you know.
Sailed? Without his captain? Said Vimes.
So, Mr. Scotland is in charge? Your first officer? Yes.
Damn, said Vimes, snapping his fingers theatrically. That man we've got in the cells on a charge of being naughtily drunk last night. We're going to have to charge him with impersonation as well then. I don't know. More blasted paperwork. The stuff just piles up. Mr. Jenkins tried to look away, but Vimes's stare kept pulling him back. The occasional tremble of a lip suggested that he was preparing a riposte, but he was bright enough to spot that Vimes's grin was as funny as the one that moves very fast towards drowning men and has a fin on top. Mr. Jenkins made a wise decision and got down. I'll go and sort. I'd better go and, he said, and pushed his way through the mob, which waited a little while to see if anything interesting was going to happen, and then, disappointed, sought out other entertainment.
You want I should go and have a look at his boat? Said Detritus.
No, Sergeant. There won't be any silk, and there won't be any paperwork. There won't be anything except a lingering aroma of fish guts.
Wow, them damn Klatchian steals everything that ain't nailed down right.
Vimes shook his head and strolled on. They don't have trolls in Klatch, do they? He said.
No, sir. It's their heat. Troll brains don't work in their heat. If I was to go to Klatch,
said Detritus, his knuckles making little bink noises as he dragged them over the cobbles,
I'd be really stupid.
Detritus.
Yes, sir.
Never go to Klatch.
No, sir.
Another speaker was attracting a much larger crowd. He stood in front of a large banner that proclaimed, Greasy, foreign, hands off, Lesp. L-E-S-H-P.
Lesp,
said Detritus.
Now there's a name that ain't got its teeth in.
It's the land that came back up from under the sea last week, said Vimes despondently. They listened while the speaker proclaimed that Ankh-Morpork had a duty to protect its kith and kin on the new land. Detritus looked puzzled.
How come there's these kith and kin on there when it only just come up from under their water?
He said. Good question, said Vimes.
They been holding their breath?
I doubt it. There was more in the air than the salt of the sea, Vimes thought. There was some other current. He could sense it. Suddenly the problem was Klatch. Ankh-Morpork had been at peace with Klatch, or at least in a state of non-war for almost a century. It was, after all, the neighboring country. Neighbours. Ha! But what did that mean? The watch could tell you a thing or two about neighbours. So could lawyers, especially the real rich ones to whom quote-unquote neighbour meant a man who'd sue for 20 years over a strip of garden 2 inches wide. People had lived for ages side by side, nodding at one another amicably on their way to work every day. And then some trivial thing would happen, and someone would be having a garden fork removed from their ear. And now some damn rock had risen up out of the sea, and everyone was acting as if Klatch had let its dog bark all night.
Agragag,
said Detritus mournfully. Don't mind me, just don't spit it on my boot, said Vimes.
it mean
Detritus waved a huge hand.
like them things what only comes in.
He paused and looked at his fingers while his lips moved.
Fours, agraga. It mean literally there time when you see them little pebbles and you just know there's gonna be a great big landslide on top of you and it already too late to run. That moment, that's agraga.
Vimes' own lips moved.
Forebodings? That's their bunny.
Where does the word come from? Detritus shrugged.
Maybe it named after their sound you make just as 1,000 ton of rock hit you.
Forebodings. Vimes rubbed his chin.
Yeah, well, I've got plenty of them.
Landslides and avalanches, he thought. All the little snowflakes land, light as a feather, and suddenly the whole side of a mountain is moving. Detritus looked at him slyly.
I know everyone say, them two short planks, they're as thick as detritus, he said. But I know which way the wind is blowing.
Vimes looked at his sergeant with a new respect. You can spot it, can you? The troll's finger tapped his helmet twice. Tink, tink, knowingly.
It pretty obvious, he said. You see up on the roofs them little chickies and dragons and stuff? And that poor bugger on their thieves' guild? You just has to watch 'em. They know. Beats me how they always point in the right way.
Vimes relaxed a little. Detritus's intelligence wasn't too bad for a troll, falling somewhere between a cuttlefish and a line dancer. But you could really rely on him not to let it slow him down. Detritus winked.
And it took to me like that time when you go and find a big club and listen to Granddad telling you how he beat up all them dwarves when he was a boy, he said. Something in their wind, right? Yes, said Vimes.
There was a fluttering above him. He sighed. A message was coming in. On a pigeon. But they tried everything else, hadn't they? Swamp dragons tended to explode in the air. Imps ate the messages, and the semaphore helmets had not been a success, especially in high winds. Semaphore, an apparatus for visual signaling. A system of visual signaling by two flags held one in each hand. Semaphore. And these semaphore helmets had not been a success, especially in high winds. And then Corporal Littlebottom had pointed out that Ankh-Morpork's pigeons were, because of many centuries of depredation by the city's gargoyle population, considerably more intelligent than most pigeons, although Vimes considered that this was not difficult because there were things growing on old, damp bread that were more intelligent than most pigeons. Depredation, to lay waste, plunder, ravage. To engage in plunder, depredate. Because of many centuries of depredation by the city's gargoyle population, considerably more intelligent than most pigeons. Although Vimes considered that this was not difficult, because there were things growing on old damp bread that were more intelligent than most pigeons. He took a handful of corn out of his pocket. The pigeon, obedient to its careful training, settled on his shoulder. In obedience to internal pressures, it relieved itself.
You know, we've got to find something better, said Vimes as he unwrapped the message. Every time we send a message to Constable Downspout, he eats it. Well, he are a gargoyle, said Detritus. He think it lunch arriving.
Oh, said Vimes. His lordship requires my attendance. How nice. Lord Veterinary looked attentive, because he'd always found that listening keenly to people tended to put them off. And at meetings like this, when he was advised by the leaders of the city, he listened with great care, because what people said was what they wanted him to hear. He paid a lot of attention to the spaces outside the words, though. That's where the things were that they hoped he didn't know and didn't want him to find out. Currently, he was paying attention to the things that Lord Downey of the Assassins' Guild was failing to say in a lengthy exposition of the Guild's high level of training and value to the city. The voice eventually came to a stop in the face of Veterinary's aggressive listening.
Thank you, Lord Downey, he said. I'm sure we shall all be able to sleep a lot more uneasily for knowing all that. Just one minor point. I believe the word assassin actually comes from Klatch. Well, indeed. And I believe also that many of your students are, as it turns out, from Klatch and its neighboring countries. The unrivaled quality of our education. Quite so. What you are telling me, in point of fact, is that their assassins have been doing it longer, know their way around our city, and have had their traditional skills honed by you.
The patrician turned to Mr. Burleigh. We surely have superiority in weapons, Mr. Burleigh?
Oh, yes. Say what you like about dwarves, but we've been turning out some superb stuff lately,
said the president of the Guild of Armourers. Ah, then that at least is some comfort.
Yes, said Burleigh. He looked wretched. However, the thing about weapons manufacture, the important thing, I believe you are about to say that the important thing about the business of weaponry is that it is a business, said the patrician.
Burleigh looked as though he'd been let off the hook onto a bigger hook.
Yes.
That, in fact, the weapons are for selling?
Exactly.
To anyone who wishes to buy them?
Yes.
Regardless of the use to which they are going to be put? The armaments manufacturer looked affronted.
Pardon me. Of course. They're weapons.
And I suspect that in recent years a very lucrative market has been Klatch.
Well, yes. The Serif needs them to pacify the outlying regions.
The patrician held up his hand. Drumknot, his clerk, gave him a piece of paper.
The quote-unquote Great Leveler, cart-mounted 10-bank, 500-pound crossbow, he said. And, let me see, the Meteor, automated throwing star hurler, decapitates at 20 paces. Money back if not completely decapitated. Have you heard of the dregs, my lord? Said Burley. They say the only way to pacify one of them is to hit him repeatedly with an axe and bury what's left under a rock. And even then, choose a heavy rock. The patrician seemed to be staring at a large drawing of the Dervish Mark III razor wire bowlers. There was a painful silence. Burley tried to fill it up. Always a bad mistake. Besides, we provided much-needed jobs in Ankh-Morpork, he murmured. Exporting these weapons to other countries, said Lord Veterinary. He handed the paper back and fixed Burley with a friendly smile. I'm very pleased to see that the industry has done so well, he said. I will bear this particularly in mind. He placed his hands together carefully. The situation is grave, gentlemen. Whose? Said Mr. Burley. I'm sorry. What? I was thinking about something else, my lord. I was referring to the fact that a number of our citizens have gone out to this wretched island, as have, I understand, a number of Klatchians. Why are our people going out there? Said Mr. Borges of the Thieves' Guild. Because they are showing a brisk pioneering spirit and seeking wealth and additional wealth in a new land, said Lord Veterinary. What's in it for the Klatchians? Said Lord Downey. Oh, they've gone out there because they are a bunch of unprincipled opportunists, always ready to grab something for nothing, said Lord Veterinary. A masterly summation, if I may say so, my lord, said Mr. Burley, who felt he had some ground to make up. The patrician looked down again at his notes. Oh, I do beg your pardon, he said. I seem to have read those last two sentences in the wrong order. Mr. Slant, I believe you have something to say here? The president of the Guild of Lawyers cleared his throat. The sound was like a death rattle, and technically it was, since the man had been a zombie for several hundred years, although historical accounts suggested that the only difference dying had made to Mr. Slant was that he'd started to work through his lunch break. Yes, indeed, he said, opening a large legal tome. The history of the city of Leshp and its surrounding country is a little obscure. It is known to have been above the sea almost 1,000 years ago. However, when records suggest that it was considered part of the Ankh-Morpork Empire. What is the nature of these records, and do they tell us who was doing the considering? Said the patrician. The door opened and Vimes stepped in. Ah, Commander, do take a seat. Continue, Mr. Slant. The zombie did not like interruptions. He coughed again. The records relating to the lost country date back several hundred years, my lord. And they are, of course, our records. Only ours? I hardly see how any others could apply, said Mr. Slant severely. Klatchian ones, for example,
said Vimes from the far end of the table.
Sir Samuel, the Klatchian language does not even have a word for lawyer,
said Mr. Slant.
Doesn't it?
Said Vimes.
Good for them.
It is our view, said Slant, turning his chair slightly so that he did not have to look at Vimes, that the new land is ours by eminent domain, extraterritoriality, and most importantly, acquiris quodcumque rapis. I am given to understand that it was one of our fishermen who first set foot on it this time.
I hear the Klatchians claim that it was one of their fishermen, said Veterinary.
At the end of the table, Vimes's lips were moving.
Let's see. Acquiris. You get what you grab, he said aloud. We're not going to take their word for it, are we? Said Slant, pointedly ignoring him. Excuse me, my lord, but I don't believe that proud Ankh-Morpork is told what to do by a bunch of thieves with towels on their heads.
No, indeed. It's about time Johnny Klatchian was taught a lesson, said Lord Selachii. Remember all that business last year with the cabbages? 10 damn boatloads they wouldn't accept.
And everyone knows caterpillars add to the flavour, said Vimes, more or less to himself.
The patrician shot him a glance.
That's right, said Selachii.
Good, honest, protein. And you remember all that trouble Captain Jenkins had over that cargo of mutton? They were going to imprison him in a Klatchian jail.
Surely not. Meat is at its best when it's going green, said Vimes. It's not as if it'd taste any different under all that curry, said Burley. I was at a dinner in the embassy once, and do you know what they made me eat? It was a sheep's. Excuse me, gentlemen, said Vimes, standing up. There are some urgent matters I must deal with.
He nodded to the patrician and hurried out of the room. He shut the door behind him and took a breath of fresh air, although right now he'd have happily inhaled deeply in a tannery. Corporal Littlebottom stood up and looked at him expectantly. She had been sitting next to a box which cooed peacefully.
Something's up. Send a pigeon down to the yard, said Vimes.
Yes, sir?
All leave is cancelled as of now, and I want to see every officer, and I mean every officer, at the yard at, let's say 6 o'clock.
Right, sir. That might mean an extra pigeon unless I can write small enough. Littlebottom hurried off. Vimes glanced out of the window. There was always a certain amount of activity outside the palace, but today there was not so much a crowd as just rather more people than you normally saw hanging around, as if they were waiting for something.
Klatch! Everyone knows it.
Old Detritus was right. You could hear the little pebbles bouncing. It's not just a few fishermen having a scrap. It's 100 years of, well, like two big men trying to fit in one small room, trying to be polite about it. And then one day, one of them just has to stretch, and pretty soon they're both smashing the furniture. But it couldn't really happen, could it? From what he'd heard, the present Serif was a competent man who was mostly concerned with pacifying the rowdy edges of his empire. And there were Klatchians living in Ankh-Morpork, for heaven's sake. There were Klatchians born in Ankh-Morpork. You saw some lad with a face that had got camels written all over it, and when he opened his mouth, it had turned out he had an Ankian accent so thick you could float rocks. Oh, there's all the jokes about funny food and foreigners, but surely not very funny jokes, come to think of it. When you hear the bang, there's no time to wonder how long the little fuse has been fizzing. There were raised voices when he went back into the rat's chamber. Because Lord Selachii, the patrician was saying, these are not the old days. It is no longer considered nice to send a warship over there to, as you put it, show Johnny Foreigner the error of his ways. For one thing, we haven't had any warship since the Mary Jane sank 400 years ago. And times have changed. These days the whole world watches. And my lord, are you no longer allowed to say, "What are you looking at?" and black their eyes? He leaned back. There's Chimeria, and Canly, and Ethib, and Sort, and Muntab these days too, and Omnia. Some of these are powerful nations, gentlemen. Many of them don't like Klatch's current expansionist outlook, but they don't like us much either. Why ever not? Said Lord Selachii. Well, because during our history, those we haven't occupied, we've tended to wage war on, said Lord Veterinary. For some reason, the slaughter of thousands of people tends to stick in the memory. Oh, history, said Lord Selachii. That's all in the past. A good place for history, agreed, said the patrician solemnly. I meant, why don't they like us now? Do we owe them money? No, mostly they owe us money, which is, of course, a far better reason for their dislike. How about Stolat and Sudopolis and the other cities? Said Lord Downey. They don't like us much either. Why not? I mean to say we do share a common heritage, said Lord Selachii. Yes, my lord, but that common heritage largely consists of having had wars with one another, said the patrician. I can't see much support there, which is a little unfortunate because we do not, in fact, have an army. I am not, of course, a military man, but I believe that one of those is generally considered vital to the successful prosecution of a war. He looked along the table. The fact is, he went on, that Ankh-Morpork has been violently against a standing army. We all know why people don't trust an army, said Lord Downey. A lot of armed men standing around with nothing to do. They start to get ideas. Vimes saw the heads turn towards him. My word, he said, with glassy brightness. Can this be a reference to old stone-faced Vimes, who led the city's militia in a revolt against the rule of a tyrannical monarch in an effort to bring some sort of freedom and justice to the place? I do believe it is. And was he commander of the watch at the time? Good heavens, yes. As a matter of fact, he was. Was he hanged and dismembered and buried in 5 graves? And is he a distant ancestor of the current commander? My word, the coincidences just pile up, don't they? His voice went from manic cheerfulness to a growl. Right, that's got that over with. Now, has anyone got any point they wish to make? There was a general shifting of position and a group clearing of throats. What about mercenaries? Said Bogus. The problem with mercenaries, said the patrician, is that they need to be paid to start fighting. And unless you are very lucky, you end up paying them even more to stop. Selakie thumped the table.
Very well, then. By Jingo, he snarled. Alone!
We could certainly do with one, said Lord Veterinary. We need the money. I was about to say that we cannot afford mercenaries.
How can this be? Said Lord Downey. Don't we pay our taxes?
Ah, I thought we might come to that, said Lord Veterinary. He raised his hand and, on cue again, his clerk placed a piece of paper in it. Let me see now. Yes, Guild of Assassins. Gross earnings in the last year. Ankh-Morpork dollars, 13,207,048 Ankh-Morpork dollars. Taxes paid in the last year, $47.22, and what on examination turned out to be a Hirschbian half dong worth 1/8 of a penny.
That's all perfectly legal. The Guild of Accountants.
Yes, Guild of Accountants. Gross earnings, 7,999,011 Ankh-Morporkian dollars. Taxes paid, nil. But, yes, I see they applied for a rebate of 200,000 Ankh-Morporkian dollars. And what we received, I may say, included a Hirschbian half-dong, said Mr. Froststrip of the Guild of Accountants. What goes around comes around, said Veterinary calmly. He tossed the paper aside. Taxation, gentlemen, is very much like dairy farming. The task is to extract the maximum amount of milk with the minimum of moo. And I am afraid to say that these days all I get is moo.
Are you telling us that Ankh-Morpork is bankrupt? Said Downey.
Of course, while at the same time full of rich people. I trust they have been spending their good fortune on swords.
And you have allowed this wholesale tax avoidance?
Said Lord Selakie. Oh, the taxes haven't been avoided, said Lord Veterinary, or even evaded. They just haven't been paid.
This is a disgusting state of affairs.
The patrician raised his eyebrows. Commander Vimes?
Yes, sir.
Would you be so good as to assemble a squad of your most experienced men, liaise with the tax gatherers, and obtain the accumulated back taxes, please? My clerk here will give you a list of the prime defaulters.
Right, sir.
And if they resist, sir, said Vimes, smiling nastily. Oh, how can they resist, Commander? This is the will of our civic leaders. He took the paper his clerk proffered. Let me see now. Top of the list. Lord Selakie coughed hurriedly.
Far too late for that sort of nonsense now, he said. Water under the bridge, said Lord Downey.
Dead and buried, said Mr. Slant. I paid mine, said Vimes. So, let me recap then, said Veterinary. I don't think anyone wants to see two grown nations scrapping over a piece of rock. We don't want to fight, but...
By Jingo! If we do, we'll show those,
Lord Selakie began. We have no ships. We have no men. We have no money too, said Lord Veterinary. Of course, we have the art of diplomacy. It is amazing what you can do with the right words. Unfortunately, the right words are more readily listened to if you also have a sharp stick, said Lord Downey. Lord Selachii slapped the table.
We don't have to talk to these people. My lords, gentlemen, it's up to us to show them we won't be pushed around. We must reform the regiments.
Oh, private armies, said Vimes. Under the command of someone whose fitness for it lies in the fact that he can afford to pay 1,000 funny hats. Someone leaned forward, halfway along the table. Up to that moment, Vimes had thought he was asleep, and when Lord Rust spoke, it was, indeed, in a sort of yawn.
Whose fitness, Mr. Vimes, lies in 1,000 years of breeding for leadership,
he said. The mister twisted in Vimes's chest. He knew he was a mister, would always be a mister, was probably a blueprint for mistership, but he'd be damned if he wouldn't be Sir Samuel to someone who pronounced years as years. Oh, good breeding, he said. No, sorry, don't have any of that. If that's what you need to get your own men killed by sheer... Gentlemen, please, said the patrician. He shook his head. Let's have no fighting, please. This is, after all, a council of war. As for reforming the regiments, well, this is, of course, your ancient right. The supplying of armed men in times of need is one of the duties of a gentleman. History is on your side. The precedents are clear enough. I cannot go against them. I have to say I cannot afford to. You're going to let them play soldiers, said Vimes.
Oh, Commander Vimes, said Mr. Burleigh, smiling. As a military man yourself, you must.
Sometimes people can attract attention by shouting. They might opt for thumping a table or even take a swing at someone else. But Vimes achieved the effect by freezing, by simply doing nothing. The chill radiated off him, lines in his face locked like a statue. I am not a military man. And then Burleigh made the mistake of trying to grin disarmingly.
Well, Commander, the helmet and armor and everything, it's really all the same in the end, isn't it? No, it's not.
Gentlemen, Lord Veterinary put his hands flat on the table, a sign that the meeting had ended. I can only repeat that tomorrow I shall be discussing the matter with Prince Kufura.
I've heard good reports of him, said Lord Rust. Strict, but fair. One can only admire what he's doing in some of those backward regions.
No, sir. You are thinking of Prince Cadram, said Lord Veterinary. Kufura is the younger brother. He is arriving here as his brother's special envoy.
Him? That one? The man's a wastrel, a cheat, a liar. They say he takes
Thank you for your diplomatic input, Lord Rust, said the patrician. We must deal with facts as they are. There's always a way. Our nations have many interests in common. And of course it says a lot of the seriousness with which Cadram is treating this matter that he is sending his own brother to deal with it. It's a nod towards the international community.
A Klatch and bigwig is coming here, said Vimes. No one told me.
Strange as it may seem, Sir Samuel, I am occasionally capable of governing this city for minutes at a time without seeking your advice and guidance. I meant there's a lot of anti-Klatchian feeling around.
A really greasy piece of work,
Lord Rust whispered to Mr. Borgis in that special aristocratic whisper that carries to the rafters.
It's an insult to send him here.
I am sure that you will see to it that the streets are safe to walk, Vimes, said the patrician sharply. I know you pride yourself on that sort of thing. Officially, he's here because the wizards have invited him to their big award ceremony. An honorary doctorate, that sort of thing. An honorary doctorate, that sort of thing. And one of their lunches afterwards. I do like negotiating with people after the faculty of Unseen University have entertained them to lunch. They tend not to move about much, and they'll agree to practically anything if they think there's a chance of a stomach powder and a small glass of water. And now, gentlemen, if you will excuse me. The lords and leaders departed in ones and twos, talking quietly as they walked out into the hall. The patrician shuffled his papers into order, running a thin finger along each edge of the pile, and then looked up. You appear to be casting a shadow, Commander. You're not really going to allow them to reform the regiment, are you? Said Vimes. There is absolutely no law against it, Vimes, and it will keep them occupied. Every official gentleman is entitled, in fact, I believe used to be required, to raise men when the city required it. And of course, any citizen has the right to bear arms. Bear that in mind, please. Arms is one thing. Holding weapons in them and playing soldiers is another. Vimes put his knuckles on the table and leaned forward. You see, sir, he said, I can't help but think that over there in Klatch, a bunch of idiots are doing the same thing. They're saying to the Serif, it's time to sort out those devils in Ankh-Morpork or Fendi. And when a lot of people are running around with weapons and talking daft stuff about war, accidents happen. Have you ever been in a pub when everyone goes armed? Oh, things are a little polite at first, I'll grant you. And then some twerp drinks out of the wrong mug or picks up someone else's change by mistake, and 5 minutes later, you're picking noses out of the beer nuts. The patrician looked down at Vimes's knuckles and stared fixedly until Vimes removed them. Vimes, you will be at the Wizards' convivium tomorrow. Sent you a memo about it. I never. A vision of the piles of unread paperwork on Vimes's desk loomed treacherously in his mind. Ah, he said. The commander of the watch leads the procession in full dress uniform. It's an ancient custom. Me? Walk in front of everyone? Indeed, very civic. As I'm sure you recall, it demonstrates the friendly alliance between the university and the civil government, which, I may say, seems to consist of their promising to do anything we ask, provided we promised not to ask them to do anything. Anyway, it is your duty. Tradition decrees it. And Lady Sybil has agreed to see to it that you are there with a crisp, bright, shining morning face. Vimes took a deep breath. You asked my wife? Certainly. She is very proud of you. She believes you are capable of great things, Vimes. She must be a great comfort to you. Well, yes. Excellent. Oh, just one other thing. Vimes. I do have the assassins and the thieves in agreement on this, but to cover all eventualities, I would consider it a favor if you could see to it that no one throws eggs or something at the prince. That sort of thing always upsets people.